fire, the valley looked almost calm, but reconnaissance already hinted that hidden North Vietnamese units were waiting beyond every line of trees. LZ X-ray was chosen because it could receive air assault waves fast, but that same openness exposed every man the instant boots hit grass. Dave was no rookie anymore. Experience had taught him that silence in jungle warfare never meant safety. It meant someone else moved first. Brick trusted procedures more than luck. In his mind, the first minutes after landing would decide who lived long enough to fight. The first wave touched down into heat, dust, and uncertainty. No one yet knew how close the enemy already was. Then the jungle answered, not with a scream, but with muzzle flashes so sudden they felt like the trees had opened fire themselves. Brick did not waste words. He read the ambush by sound, spacing, and angle, then turned panic into sectors of fire. He drew in mud because maps meant little once bullets arrived. Distance, cover, and arcs of fire became the only language left. The Huey defined this war: speed, surprise, and exposed insertion. It could deliver troops fast, but not protect them once the door opened. Dave had survived enough firefights to know the worst sound was not gunfire. It was the sudden gap between volleys. Brick understood what the enemy wanted: freeze the landing zone, isolate small groups, and kill men before full strength could arrive. Every second mattered now. Reinforcements were still coming in waves, and each arriving helicopter was flying straight into uncertainty. The battle for Ia Drang had begun exactly where modern mobility met ancient terrain, and both sides knew retreat would cost more than advance. Brick knew the landing zone was not just under fire. It was being measured, tested, and shaped by an enemy probing for weakness. The M60 machine gun was the backbone of immediate suppression, throwing sustained fire that could pin movement even when visibility collapsed. Dave watched the machine gun team work and understood the truth every veteran learns. Volume of fire buys seconds, and seconds buy survival. Brick never explained tactics as theory. He pointed with a casing, a boot print, and the bodies of men forced too close together. The North Vietnamese did not waste ammunition. They fired from concealment, shifted positions fast, and made every tree line feel alive. That was the real trap. The Americans had air mobility, but the enemy owned the distances between one clump of trees and the next. Dave moved because standing still meant dying. Veteran instinct forced him lower, faster, and meaner than fear wanted him to be. Even under pressure, Brick kept one principle intact: never let fear compress the perimeter into a single easy target. Air assault doctrine promised speed and initiative, but Ia Drang proved that landing first did not mean controlling the ground. The rifles mattered, but discipline mattered more. Units that fired wildly vanished into smoke. Units that controlled rhythm stayed alive. Brick's battlefield education was simple: identify the enemy's rhythm, break it once, and you might survive long enough to break it again. For a moment, the return fire worked. One sector of jungle quieted, and that silence felt more dangerous than the shooting before it. That was where experience mattered most. Young soldiers chased quiet. Veterans suspected it because ambushes often breathed before striking again. By now, Ia Drang was revealing its central lesson: superior technology could enter the battlefield faster, but not simplify it. The next phase was worse than the first. Initial shock had passed, and now both sides began fighting with intention instead of instinct. Dave could feel the battlefield narrowing, not physically but psychologically, as every tree began to look like a doorway to death. Brick saw the same fear spreading and attacked it the only way he knew how, with tasks, movement, and brutal clarity. This was where veterans separated themselves from survival and chance. Dave kept functioning, even while terror chewed at it from inside. The enemy pressure shifted again. Not a full charge, not a retreat, but a patient tightening designed to stretch the perimeter thin. Brick did not call it psychology, but he understood morale as well as he understood firepower. Broken minds collapsed faster than broken lines. Dave hated that Brick was right. Fear became manageable only when there was still someone colder standing beside you. Somewhere beyond the smoke, officers on both sides were making the same calculation: commit more now or lose the initiative forever. The wounded changed everything. Every casualty pulled hands-off rifles, stole attention, and forced choices no commander could ever make cleanly. Brick solved it the way hard commanders always do: save who you can, hold what you must, and never surrender the center. The jungle kept lying. It hid numbers, hid movement, and hid intent until the last possible second. That uncertainty was a weapon in itself. Men fired at shapes, sounds, and guesses, exhausting ammunition and nerve at the same time. Dave remembered every old lesson at once. Stay low, stay useful, and never let panic choose your direction for you. By the end of this phase, nobody still believed in a quick fight. Ia Drang had become a contest of endurance, nerves, and command. Then came the sprint phase of the battle, when hesitation died, and both sides started betting everything on violent momentum. Dave felt his body moving ahead of thought now. Training, trauma, and survival instinct fused into one brutal mechanical rhythm. Rick understood that the next few minutes would decide whether the line bent and recovered, or snapped forever. The jungle edge convulsed with movement. Not enough to see clearly, only enough to know that something larger was coming. When the pressure hit, it hit like a wall. Short range, sudden, and intimate enough that every order had to be screamed. Dave stopped feeling brave. He was simply functional now, a wounded nervous system carrying a rifle through organized chaos. Rick countered the assault with shape, not emotion. He kept bending the defense into angles the enemy could not digest cleanly. For a few violent seconds, the Americans held because men like Brick could still think while death pressed against their faces. But holding was not winning. Every exchange cost stamina, ammunition, and the fragile confidence that tomorrow would still exist. The worst battles do not feel heroic inside them. They feel narrow, dirty, repetitive, and brutally unfinished. And still Brick kept the line alive, not by promise, but by making every man believe the next 10 seconds were survivable. By sunset, survival was no longer about courage. It was about order held together at the edge of collapse. Night did not end the danger. It magnified it because darkness stripped away distance and left every sound sounding close enough to kill. Dave had always feared the dark after combat. At night, memory and threat stopped being separate things. Rick prepared for darkness the same way he prepared for daylight, by reducing chaos into sectors, timings, and hard instructions. Survival now depended on restraint. One nervous burst into the dark could trigger confusion, waste ammunition, and expose the line. In battles like this, men did not defeat fear. They negotiated with it minute by minute, pretending function was the same thing as courage. Rick kept them alive by making the next hour smaller. Not dawn, not victory, just the next sector check and the next reload. When dawn threatened the horizon, nobody felt relief. Morning would only mean they could finally see what was still trying to kill them. Ia Drang proved that modern air assault could seize ground fast, but holding it still depended on exhausted men making perfect decisions imperfectly. Dave would survive this fight, but not leave it untouched. The body can exit a battlefield long before the mind does. Brick would never call this victory in any romantic sense. He would call it a line held, a lesson paid for, and a morning earned. That is the real shape of combat at Ia Drang. Not myth, not glory, but disciplined men enduring terror one decision at a time. And if this story hits you hard, remember why these battles must be studied honestly, because bad memory creates the next disaster. History remembers the helicopters, the gunfire, and the courage, but the men inside remembered the breathing, the waiting, and the fear. Like, subscribe, and share now, because the next real battlefield lesson is already waiting in the shadows of history.